Spontaneous and random insights once more from the studio. Actually, not sure how spontaneous or random. I just always liked the idea of that kind of immediacy about thought and action, especially if you're rooted in something that is what I consider to be evolved, an evolved state of awareness within myself, within others. There is a spontaneity that seems to have even a sense of purpose more than anything else that is planned. We're kind of tied into a purpose, a feeling that we're doing the right thing. We're attaching ourselves to those people or to experiences or to even a worldview that feels right. And I'm voiceovering. As you see me, I'm working on a couple of sculpt paintings, and they're a tandem. They're Adam and Eve. Adam, you can see in the background, and I'm working on Eve. This is a few days ago, a week ago. It changed, as you will see. I'll put it at the end of this video, but I'm thinking, I'm reflecting on certain aspects of what I experience within myself, and I tend to reiterate fundamental notions. And one of these notions, what I consider to be fundamental notions, is what I've learned through this YouTube experience. Particularly, I find this YouTube experience has actually given me quite a bit in terms of posting and risking, to a great extent risking. And I think any good art always is associated with a level of risk, that people risk when they produce something of value. There is always a level of risk, which is, I suppose, to some extent, it's a worldview that without pain, no gain idea. I suppose risk is considered to be troublesome or dangerous from the point of view that things could change. And really, I suppose it's true, as Buddhists say, nothing stays the same. Things change all the time. And I think the element of risk is essential in being able to present something of value, especially if whatever it is we're practicing doesn't work. The idea of a lifestyle that is based on conformity, and conformity to me basically is go along, get along kind of idea. It never works. I mean, ultimately it never works. It may have a short-term application, and the longer we practice go along, get along idea, the worse things seem to get. Anyway, there is a thought I had this morning that I was having breakfast with a friend, and we're actually working together on planting our garden. We have a garden plot. It's maybe, I don't know, 60 feet, 80 feet by 20 feet. It's a fair size. It'll produce quite a bit of vegetable matter at the end of the season. And we have discussions, we discuss things, we get ourselves revved up. It was quite a long revving up this morning. It took probably an hour and a half. We had some porridge and coffee and conversation. And I really appreciate his input into my life. I enjoy meeting up and doing things together that is totally outside of the idea of joining up with other artists, making art. I find that to be quite arbitrary in my life anyway, joining with other artists. There is no point in joining with other artists if, as a human being, like I said to him, for me, Picasso's greatest work was Guernica, because it was connected to a fundamental outrage he felt. And the brilliance of that work is not just that he introduced elements, aesthetic elements, but that he produced something that was totally connected to a primordial sense within himself that had value and meaning. It wasn't just arbitrary. What am I getting towards? I was thinking in terms of our own experience, and I'm now going to think a little bit about this YouTube experience for me, and what I've understood fundamentally. To present myself on YouTube as opposition to is, to a great extent, not totally, but to a great extent, missing the point, because there's always this sense of being in the headlights of the other story, not my story, but someone else's story. So if we're in opposition, and there is value to being in opposition, especially as a contrarian fundamentally suggests opposition to, not going along with. However, the more important part of that is my own story needs to emerge. In other words, my sense of self as every person who activates within themselves something that is of value and significance and meaning, ultimately end up creating the story that will change things in one's own life. And through an inspirational process, I think, you can't teach or tell anybody anything. A person has to be ready. I have to be ready to be able to receive. By the way, receive is Bible, kibble, is translated as receive. That's all it is. And we're not ready to receive, no matter how much you bludgeon anyone into submission. That is of no value. It may have the short-term value, but it really has no value per se. So as a YouTuber, as a person of conscience, as I diligently work on being the best I can be through an inner compass, what I call conscious, what is known as conscience. I'm not the first person to raise this issue. The reason this word exists, it's because it's a phenomenon that is fundamental in human nature. It's distinguishable primarily in what makes you, you, and me. There is something fundamental within all of us that I keep bringing up in my dissertations, and which I have understood to focus on, to put forward in my own work, in my art work, that unless it is rooted in this inner compass, like I said about Picasso, it's the greatest work he ever made because it incorporated a completeness. He introduced, obviously, he had a vision, the way he saw the world. I mean, critics come and call it cubism, but I think more importantly, whatever value it had to me was associated with something that came from this inner compass within him, and he was able to develop it from an artistic aesthetic point of view, but more important for me, like this painting Guernica, check it out. It was in response to the fascist bombing a town in the Basque country called Guernica, north of Spain, that was destroyed and pummeled because people opposed the tyrants, Franco at the time. So my point, what I think I'd like to say again, and in terms of my own understanding, what I've learned, and when I was speaking with my friend, I said there is really very little value in being in opposition without having our own story. Now this is very important, that if you see yourself the way I see myself, as a contrarian, meaning in opposition to, that I don't go along just because somebody says something, and they may even be right, but in essence, the practice of being in opposition to is essential to me forming my own conviction and understanding. You cannot form a conviction and understanding through compliance. Compliance is something, it's low on my list of to do. Compliance is not exactly something that I embrace, because my own work suffers as consequence of being compliant with. And I think it's natural to be influenced, and it's natural to imitate something that you admire and you like. There's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, it will lead to those people who are able to combine, I suppose, for lack of a better word, the aesthetics of our experience with, in a way, the real world that we face every day. This is quite magnificent. I find this represented in different kinds of art. Contemporary, not so much, although it does. I mean, there are people that have a deep commitment to doing the right thing in their art as well. And activism in art fundamentally relies on this sense of the inner compass taking precedence to anything that might be an influence from outside. So if you're doing something that is considered to be insignificant, but you're convinced that it involves your personal conviction that you're doing the right thing, this work will be important. No matter what, this work will be important. I don't care what it looks like, it will be important. And you cannot withdraw into spectacle to give yourself a feeling of significance the way contemporary art, as it is represented by most of the people that are promoted. I've talked about this. You can check my videos. I talk about Murakami and Ai Weiwei and Schnabel and David Salle and Koons and all the usual suspects. And there's no point, like I say, for me to reiterate and to reinforce the usual suspect with my criticism, no matter how founded it is. I need to create my own story. And this is something that I find extremely important, and what I'm learning from my friend. And he and I, we're working together on the garden plot. He's big on creating community, and community is another person. It's you and another person. You have a community. And I think it's a practical application to plant seeds and to harvest in the fall. I think this is an activity that ties us to something significant, meaningful, valuable. It's not going to the food store to get your food, although you cannot be entirely independent anymore. But just to round this off, I don't think I've produced a video in a while, but what I really find I want to keep focusing on is an expression of what it is that I feel about myself that allows me to succeed every day. Like succeed in the sense of I feel something is working in my life, something is right. And it's not how much I can point a finger, but that I will achieve the results that I want, whether it be if I'm a political activist or an environmentalist. And Fukushima is everything, because this is the greatest event and catastrophe that has ever occurred on Earth, among a lot of other things that are going very, very wrong. But this is, as I say, the jewel in the crown. But how do I contribute to something that gives us hope and a chance to survive this? I'm not sure physically how this is going to be done, but I know that through my own contrary position, I will be part of the solution, because the principle of the contrary position is that whatever it is that is being promoted or is being presented to us isn't working. People, it's not working. You can look at this in large scale, small scale, whichever direction you take this in, you can come to the conclusion and be right about this, that it's not working. So how do you make something work? Is it to bludgeon everyone into submission, or is it to change ourselves? And I think this ultimately, I'm not sure. I suppose there are swamis and religions of brilliance that promote this concept, but it's never followed up on. Like the way I feel I need to keep saying this over and over, that pointing fingers is going to end nowhere. You're going to have temporary relief possibly from something, but the old boss, new boss syndrome is always in play when you're pointing externally. It's literally, we need to become the change that we want to see around us everywhere. And it seems like convoluted or kind of like what is it? A kind of sophistry to say, well, this is a functioning plan or strategy to say, okay, the world will be better if I become better. Bloody hell, yeah, exactly. The world will be a better place if we make ourselves better, if we do that which is the right thing to do, whether that is on a microcosm or as we extend ourselves into a larger reality. This will take effect. This will take effect. I've seen it in my own life that I feel better about my contacts and my relationships because I've understood this. It's not a matter of me seeing the fault in anyone as much as it is me acting the way I want to be. And if a person finds and accepts this, they themselves will do what I'm doing. This is how I perceive this, and I see this happening, and I see this happening for myself. I copy people that I see doing the right thing, having understood something and doing the right thing. And I would say, I look at, from an art point of view, I look at Picasso only in a very limited window. Like I said, this Guernica, and I have aesthetic interest as a professional artist, I suppose. That's kind of weird. Professional artist doesn't make sense either, because professional is a weird term in the way people understand it. But, or someone like Goya, who exercised his outrage in a lot of his work. I find that to be quite extraordinary. You know, I like Goya tremendously. So just as a final note today, I want to say that the notion of fake, which has been proposed by our great leader called Trump, is in fact quite prescient from the point of view, and here is my conclusion, that everything is actually fake without this element of rightness that each person can exercise. So when we try to establish a position of truth has, like I have said, truth is a moving target without this element of conscience. And without this element, everything, in fact, our experience of the world out there is only perception and can be manipulated and is not real. It's fake. Everything, whether it's the notions, the laws that govern the universe that we believe to be true, these external realities that we see outside of ourselves, they are not true. They are fake without this element. However this is engaged in our day-to-day experience, this is my notion now. I find I am in opposition to virtually everything because there is no conscience. That's how it works. Everything is fake because I see the lies, or what Trump likes to call fake, and everyone else is jumping on fake, is basically fake and lies because there is no conscience. Because if a person is honest and presents themselves with that honesty, it has meaning and significance, even if they're wrong. Anyway, I think I'll end it here. It's long enough. And what you see in the background are my two latest sculpt paintings, Adam and Eve. And I will continue to do what I do and hopefully be able to improve myself and learn. And yeah, I mean, everyone wants to within the best part of themselves wants to be able to contribute to this experience in a way that will benefit others, not hurt or destroy or create more dysfunction. So I will continue in the way I understand this to be operative in myself, and I hope within you as well.